Congratulations also to all the people that have worked across the globe. This has been really incredible. We have been following overnight and moving from one country to another country, different people, different cultures, different languages, but everybody discussing toward bringing the same conclusions and trying to contribute to shape the future of the internet. I think that's. I'm sure we have some photos about what has happened along all those 16 hours. So maybe we can share something. So when I see all the pictures together, I realize that this has been even more impressive than what we thought. Tell me if you agree with me, but this has been a great way to celebrate our 25th anniversary. This is impressive, really. It's thousands of people discussing around the world, right? But I'm sure, Joyce, that you and the team are really excited with the idea of going to sleep. So, but maybe before going to sleep, you can. Maybe before going to sleep, Joyce, maybe you can share with us some of what you think, what your takeaway of what has been discussed across all the nodes. Our illustrators have done an incredible job, and I think that I'm sure you can use that for explaining something to us. So, floor is yours, Joyce.
Well, we're ready to party, not to sleep, you know, because we haven't had our chance yet. We kind of saw everybody partying, but we haven't really done it yet. So that's what we're gearing up to. So we're still full of energy here. We had an amazing team of I'm going to say it right. Yeah. Virtual, visual translators. I've said it 16 times. The 17th was wrong. So I just want to maybe quickly highlight you guys before we move into the content. So Joachim, Jevka. So this is the team that made this big drawing here that we're going to talk about. So we're not gonna clap yet. We're gonna talk about it first. So this is just so they see who you are, and then if they like it, they can clap. Okay, bye bye. So Dennis, you ready? Shall we?
I am. Yes,
okay.
I am. Yeah. So let's go. Let's check it out. Let's check it out. Because what we did, we actually took a whole wall, and I don't know if the people who are not on the metric system know what a meter is, but it's
something like this
by 50 and about 4 meters wide. It's quite a big wall, and we actually covered the whole thing, but it needs to have a story.
Sure.
So it starts with celebration. So that's in the middle.
That's where we are.
And we're celebrating 25 years of building the internet together. And it's when you want to make something that is very undescribable like the internet, you have to give it the shape. The simplest shape for the internet is
the box.
Cube, a box. It is the thing, is the talk, the box talk, the building block of everything that has been done over the last 25 years. So all the people that are around here, 56 nodes celebrating outside of the nodes that were actually going around the world.
I'm going to just say something here. I just want to thank our chapters for participating so actively in the celebration. We had them all over the world. So thank you guys. You were amazing.
We actually put everybody on their own nodes. The names are not there yet, but I'm sure we're going to be able to do that. But all of these people, they're all celebrating the fact that they've built this whole thing in 25 years. But what to do next? So
then we moved. We
moved from the fact that we did 25 years from the source, and we needed to actually take this out and go on a journey. And we went on a journey.
So where did we go?
Around the world.
Where did we go?
And the first place we went to was Tokyo, Japan.
It was. Kampai.
Kampai.
You remember sake? We had some sake.
We had some sake. We had a sake ceremony with some amazing things, and there were people talking about global boundaries, domestic boundaries, and how to teach the youth about being aware of those and how to handle those. Next, we actually went to Brisbane, and maybe there's some music that we can put on, but we'll wait for that. We won't wait for it. We'll go through. So.
Music.
Let's
go down under.
Yeah, we have to go down under.
It's okay.
So go to the next one. Yeah, here we go. Now we're on track. Now we're actually going to the land of the kangaroos.
Yes.
And
so
we talked about all kinds of things. So the most important thing was that we were actually gearing up to protect and preserve the rights and needs of the users. When this was actually done, we went into Singapore. And Singapore was an amazing story about all kinds of music being shared all around the world, but the power of the media, they needed to be more aware of the power of the media. So that's an actionable step that they need to take.
So those were the busy bees, right? The ones walking really fast?
Yep. Then we went to Delhi, where we actually, I'll write down here, the women as social connectors to fight the digital illiteracy for the digital inclusion. That was the step. Women need to be the connectors.
So there was a strong discussion there as well about how to actually bring women in into access, and how that would actually make a difference into the social integration, the economical development of the country as well. So the crucial role of women online was really outlined there.
Yep. Yep. And then from Delhi, we made a move towards.
Should I come down with you?
Fliek on Vlak.
Mauritius.
And in Mauritius, the most important thing was that they needed to share more local content. They just needed to actually get things together. That's when things didn't work in the internet anymore. You needed to be able to just share stuff locally and move.
And what's the gap here?
The gap. That was a digital divide. We need to get in the person who actually did that. So what is the gap? Jefta, really quickly.
The gap there also has to do with physically getting internet in different places to access, and it's the sign. The sign is there also to trigger the question, but if you say gap, what do you actually mean?
Yeah.
So this definitely meant to be a conversation starter.
Okay, perfect, a conversation starter. Conversations need to go to song, and we sang a lot in Johannesburg. Yeah, that was beautiful, singing and dancing. But the most important thing there was the youth, focus on youth and giving them the opportunity to be a part of the knowledge sharing, and then opening up the opportunities for them.
And actually bringing in the youth to actually open up competition, bringing it into the digital literacy part, and also actually bringing life from analog to digital as well. And so the analog part was very important in the discussion here.
Beautiful discussion, beautiful discussion. So moving from Joburg, we went to Egypt, Cairo. And here, the most important thing was that the talk about technology and business actually was missing one thing, and it was lacking humanity.
The people?
The people. I would say it's a simple thing, but it's a very powerful thing.
So the internet without the people doesn't work, right?
Doesn't work. So going from Cairo, we get up and we go to Beirut. And in Beirut,
where we had our own Salam. Salam was actually moderating the session there. So we they had some interesting discussions on how to keep the flow of social media on how to keep a safe and open and free internet for the future of the young society. So again, the youth was a big part of the discussion.
I could not say it any better. We need to go to Istanbul, to Turkey. And there the biggest problem was that the internet was just shut down. There was the throttle needed to be opened up, because it was just shut and people weren't able to actually get through and check if their friends were okay. Very important takeaway. Here we went to Geneva, from Turkey to Geneva, big step.
And we were in an amazing location. We had the opportunity of being in CERN.
Nothing like the music. But here we talked about how the Internet of Things could actually impact the way that people interact with their products.
And also the importance of actually data. So who owns the data once it's actually flowing from one device to the other? And so the trust issue was a big one.
The most important thing was trust, and how to actually move to the next phase in that. Going from Geneva, we actually...
Big snake, Lisbon.
And Lisbon was an amazing discussion about AI and about how this is the snake you need to charm and how big data that can work for you. But you have to be careful for the fangs of the AI. So we have to teach people basic skills in managing the cyberspace.
Then we went back to Africa?
Back to Africa, Dakar. And in Dakar, we actually had to reach over the borders and connect the rising possibilities within the region. We had
some discussions on fake news and so on. So it was very intense discussion there as well. Then we went to Latin America.
Montevideo. And in Montevideo, we just have to improve the community participation by having the good tools to create better communities.
So bringing in the multi-stakeholder participation, as we call it, so bringing government, technology, company, also obviously people, the community, civil society.
And in Guadalajara, we had the opportunity to draw in a wave, who's catching the wave and taking control of surfing your internet. And of course, finally, we had New York City. And you cannot describe the discussion that was there. It was just very interesting. But we have to think long term and be there for the people was the main takeaway that we took away from this whole journey. So all of these points that were going around the world, they're all actionable steps. And they take us to something over here.
Come here so we can...
So we are actually going to the LA Closing Roundtable, but at the end of this roundtable, we will have something that has humanity at the center of tomorrow's internet. And the internet is a force for good. So join the Internet Society, share your story, to actually create action and move forward towards.
So shall we do the final?
We should, yeah.
The final. So we want to share with you the final move the movement of this whole conversation that was created during those discussions. So come on, guys and girls.
Slowly.
Are we ready?
From the beginning.
25 years.
25 years.
And we're moving and into the future. So, Raul.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Thank you very much. I think that we will continue here. Congratulations once again to all the team. And I think, Matthew, you will take the floor here in Los Angeles.
Okay, I think we're going to let them enjoy themselves after incredible 16 hours touring the world. What a fantastic thing. And what I would note there is that those wonderful illustrations, they work so well in capturing some of the incredibly important ideas and aspirations and concerns that we've seen throughout the past 16 hours and that have been reflected in the report that the Internet Society released yesterday. So, I'm Matthew Shears. I'm an independent consultant, and I've worked with the Internet Society since 2005 in various capacities. I'm also one of the authors of the report that was released yesterday. And I'll be co-moderating today's closing session with Colin McClay. Colin, if you want to introduce yourself.
My name is Colin McClay. I work across town at the University of Southern California, where I teach at the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism and run the Annenberg Innovation Lab. And I could not be more honored and thrilled to be here with you today, and especially after that tour de force of community participation, which is just really inspiring. The sort of the global nature of Internet Society, reflecting the internet that, as observed, we have built and are building together. So
it was a wonderful, fitting illustration to kind of cap up the incredible process that we've been through over the past year and a half in pulling the Internet Futures Report together. In many ways, it was entirely driven by community input, and it's great to see all this fantastic community input coming through the nodes over the past 16 hours and bringing it all to that close. What we're going to do now is we're going to bring things together. We're going to bring together the 25 under 25 session, the Hall of Fame, the 25th anniversary into this closing session. We're going to ask some experts from our community to give their views on some of the key emerging issues and some of the challenges that we face. And we really want this to be, I think Colin and I were talking about how can we make this, we don't have party favors and we don't have champagne. Unfortunately, it's a bit early in the day, but we want to keep this as lively, as interactive as possible. So we're really going to depend on you to ask us questions, ask the panelists when they come up. Once they've given their couple of minutes on their various issues that they want to talk about and their concerns, then please feel free, put your questions into the chat if you're remote, or just raise your hand in the room. We've got plenty of time for questions. Shall we run through the structure? Just to, I don't know if you want to.
So, the structure, I think of this as a three-ring circus, with all due respect to our fabulous participants. First, a brief discussion on emerging issues with a focus on technology, security, and governance, followed by questions and answers. And so hopefully that begins the interactivity. Then a discussion on the future, some of the recommendations that have emerged through the report process and the round-the-world conversation, with a focus on the impact of the world that we're living in on the individual and sort of the humanities side of all this, again followed by questions and answers. And then we will have we will rise to the crescendo with a closing session from the chair of the Internet Society Board and the CEO. So with that, we will move on to lunch.
Yes, so.
All the important things right there.
And we're going to pepper a couple of videos in there as well for your enjoyment. So I think what we'll do is we'll move straight forward. We'll ask Nabil Boukalid, Hans-Peter Dietler, and Lynn Santamor to come to the table. And we're going to have two groups of individuals who'll come to the table. This is the first, and as Colin said, we'll talk about emerging themes and technology and governance issues. And then the second group will come to the table. We'll have Q&A, and then the second group will come to the table. We'll talk about more the individual impact on the individual society and norms and things like that. So I think we're all mic'd up. Nabil, if you want to lead us off and give us your views on some of those key emerging issues and some of the concerns and opportunities from your perspective. And then we'll go to Hans-Peter and then to Lynn.
I believe that I'm going to take a step back, and rather than talking about emerging issues, talk about one term that seems to be reappearing constantly. It's trust.
Okay.
And I mean, we've been strong advocates around anonymity. We followed that we should not really identify people. But I believe trust, I mean, is transparency, where anonymity is against transparency. And we seem to be advocating both at the same time. Trust is based on identifying who is doing what. And businesses are based on trust. Security would require identifying, and this is also trust. So I believe that this is an issue that, even though anonymity served us very well until today to grow the community, but at that stage we need to take a step back and look into how we can take the internet into being supportive of businesses, supportive of transactions, supportive of AI, supportive of IoT. I mean, IoT, the main problem with it is the lack of trust, identifying what's happening and where.
So as you, I think that is a key theme that we all deal with, and a shared value in the sense that if we want the internet and related technologies to be useful for us, we all need to be able to trust them, right? There's a sort of a rising tide effect where whatever your business is, you will also pay the price of my lack of trust.
Even freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. I mean, if somebody wants to say something and we want that thing to be said effectively, we need to identify who is doing it. So all over history, freedom of speech was based on courage. People will go and say what they believe in, and they fight for it. They will not say it behind closed doors. If they say it behind closed doors, it has no effect. I mean, fake news, if we have identifying and trust, we will not have fake news.
But this also seems to relate to norms, right? If in some instances online we have gatherings where people are attacked for their views and for their speech, then the anonymity remains important, right? So how do you kind of...
What is the effect of somebody who's saying something and not standing behind it? How will you bring it to completion, to execution, to fulfillment? So, I mean, as I said, I mean, in all revolutions, and this is a revolution, you go out and say whatever you believe in, face to face, and you suffer the consequences of that. If you're hiding, nobody is going to take the relay and fight for it.
Thank you, Nabil. Maybe we can...
Oh, Kathy wants it.
If we can hold the questions until...
and just about 3 minutes.
Just throw out 3 minutes, and then we can unleash you. Hans-Peter, if you can comment a little bit on perhaps building a little bit on what Nabil said, but also in terms of some of the technology challenges that you're seeing.
Yes, I'll try my best. Question was, what are the technology or technological challenges in front of us if we want the internet grow and prosper as it has been for the last 25 years or 40 years, depending when you define the real start of the internet. And from a technical viewpoint, I think it's the last time, more or less, 3 major topics. It's availability, reliability, and trust. Trust is coming up over and over. We heard it just now, and it's something. And from a technical viewpoint, I think, I believe availability is quite well covered by the technical evolution. It's simply going forward. It's simply getting better. It's getting lower in price. It's getting lower in power consumption. It's easy to distribute. And coming back to what I've seen in the demonstration of the 25, under 25, things like using a small computer, a Raspberry machine, as a local node, as a local Wi-Fi node in a rural area, powered by some battery-packed small solar panel, and also used for storage of data to be available in times where you have no connectivity because your connectivity is breaking up, and still being able to run your school courses is one of the examples which are possible by technical development over time. And this will continue. I don't think we have to change too much. This is fine. It's going on. It's going on. It was standardization at the IETF, at other bodies. It quite nicely. Reliability is another thing. We rely more and more in our life on the existence of the internet. If the internet went down, we have a problem. I've seen, I'm not sure on which of the nodes, one of the nodes, choking down the internet is a problem. I think it's a big problem. Being in Africa, at the African Summit this summer, we were told that over the last years, more than 50 shutdowns were done somewhere in a country. And the last shutdown just a few weeks ago costs millions per day just by shutting down the internet. It's not only keeping people from their right of freedom of speech or possibility of communication, it's simply costing money. And I think technology can improve. Technology can make it more connected, more resilient against hardware failure or failures from things like storms running over your island or your country. But in the end, technology is limited in this area. If local governments decide to shut down the internet, no technology can resist. As soon as 20 people with machine guns come into your computer room, you have no choice but to shut down. So that's a problem we cannot solve by technology alone. Third big block, trust, and it's in my belief a different thing. I don't believe we engineers can construct trust. You cannot construct it. It has to be built up over time. It has to be brought up like a little flower. You have to be nice to your flower. You have to water it. You have to nourish it. And slowly, trust is being built up. I heard this morning from one of the nodes, I believe it was a Geneva node. Yeah, it was a Geneva node. They had a headline, Regaining Trust in the Internet. And one of the panelists heavily was against this headline. He said, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. There was never trust built into the network. We engineers never intended to build trust. Trust is something which has to come out of the whole ecosystem around the internet. You cannot put it into the network alone, and do not by technical construction. I think that's exactly right. Technology can only provide tools to allow us all to work on improving the trust, but the trust must come from everywhere. Users must work on their trust. Engineers must work on the tools. Scientists must work on methods and telling people, educating people, for example, what it means to shut down the internet, what it means to restrict communications. And there need a lot of knowledge built around this. And that's the only way working together, which is in my belief, makes it possible to go on and work on a more secure and more reliable, and in the end, a more trustworthy, I wouldn't say internet, a more trustworthy IT ecosystem. Okay.
Fantastic. Before we go to Lynn, I was wondering if I could just ask Nabil and Hans-Peter, one of the big issues that we've heard throughout this, building this report, and that comes through on a consistent basis, is the challenge of cybersecurity. And obviously cybersecurity threats undermine that trust. What are your views on how do we address that challenge, that cybersecurity threats? Nabil, do you want to?
I believe that, I disagree with Hans on that issue, because I believe that the network was designed by mistake not to have any trust in it, any identity in it. It was not by planning. It was because it was deployed with, and I used to support 100% anonymity on the network, and that you are not responsible to provide security and identity on the network. But today I don't. After 21 years, I don't. I believe that we're moving into a phase where on that network, on the internet, there are billions and billions of transactions, billions of life depends on that. And all businesses anywhere on the globe depends on identifying people. You cannot have a transaction with somebody that you don't know. How can you trust that? And security is one of the issues. I mean, we're identifying today, but on a top layer, but leaving the base layer open. So security is based because the nodes that are attacking, we cannot really trace. We cannot go back to them and identify this is coming from that individual specifically. If we can identify, he will not be able to launch the attack and stand unharmed. I believe that we're moving to a phase where the globe depends on that technology to run lots of things. Lots of things. It's not only us engineers and academicians in the background doing our own stuff.
It's a shared responsibility.
It's a shared responsibility.
Hans-Peter, do you want to comment on the cybersecurity?
Yes, trying to find an answer. I believe you can't go so directly or so absolutely in identifying everybody, everywhere, at every time. That would be nice. It would be make some people in governments, some people I'm consulting from time to time in law enforcement very happy to have such a possibility. But at the same time, it would be an immense collateral damage to the possibilities we are used to find in the internet. So instead of having complete anonymity, which is not good for the stability and everything, we have to find a way somewhere in between, being able to identify most of the sources of communication, most of the sources of data is fine, but we also have to find ways which are trusted again to provide some kind of anonymity, which might be a pseudo-anonymity, whatever, where we can be sure that some things cannot be tracked back because it's doing harm to the people who are telling sometimes the truth against the government or against other rules. So there must be something in between. We also have to accept that not everybody can do anything without some restrictions. I always believe in the freedom of everybody, or the freedom of, even the freedom of speech should be limited as soon as you start hurting somebody else. So there must be some leverage between both poles, and I don't believe the complete going right or the complete going left is so correct. We have to find some middle way.
So you've helpfully confirmed what I always feel, that while technology is complicated, humans and organizations are infinitely more complicated.
Yes.
That's where we have the work to do. And I feel like you've wonderfully teed us up to go to Lynn St. Amour to help us think about governance and about how we make these decisions, whether that are maybe manifest in technology, maybe manifest through rules, through other changes, through social norms, but maybe you could just take us away.
I mean, this last discussion is really just ideal for really sort of showing the complexity in the issues. You know, if we think about how much public roles and private roles and the role of civil society has changed over the last 10 years, 20 years, that was facilitated largely by the internet and everything that has enabled. It continues to be facilitated by tools, by organizations such as ISOC, by processes, multi-stakeholder processes, by forums such as the Internet Governance Forum. All those things have changed expectations fundamentally, you know, at an individual level. We expect openness and transparency and information and engagement, real engagement, not just there was a survey or a government consulted, you know, and took the input back in, but real engagement. And that genie's out of the bottle, you know, or the horse out of the barn, whatever. You know, we all need to recognize that we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to our neighbors. We have a responsibility to our nations. We have a responsibility to our partners, because it is so interconnected. And one of the things I'm really happy to see in some of the Internet Society work is really the focus on community and society, because that's where this change is going to happen. And it's where all the fundamental conflicts we have between cybersecurity, and by the way, we actually conflate trust and cybersecurity a lot as well, and I think it's really important that we pull those apart. All these discussions are really nuanced, and they take time, and that's why processes such as intercommunity forum, ISOC, Internet Governance Forum are so critical, because it actually allows us time to pull apart and understand different perspectives and different desires and different criteria and different social and different norms, different expectations. And you know, the world's never experienced anything like this in terms of some of the social and the economic, political issues we're trying to solve. And we've never tried to solve them in a world which is so interconnected and where we're virtually boundaryless. And you know, we use multi-stakeholder a lot, and there's a lot of confusion over multi-stakeholder models. You know, to me, it means voices. Your voice is heard, you can engage, you can participate. It doesn't mean joint decision-making in all instances. In some cases, it does. In some cases, clearly a decision for something is the responsibility of one stakeholder. But I think it's imperative, you know, and ISOC says, you make better decisions, the better informed you are. You know, if you can make those decisions having been fully informed by all parties that need to engage, that are impacted, that are going to have to live with or live under these policies and these activities, we will get to a better decision for society. But that's all really new ground. And for me, the one thing that's the most important is that we all really engage and we all participate. And I think, again, everything the Internet Society is doing with respect to youth and really featuring youth is so critical. You have the passion, the energy, you're perhaps not jaundiced, as some of us might be by having fought these battles for so long and sometimes seemingly have made such little progress. But you just need to engage, you need to get in, you need to be part of the discussions, you need to insist on being part of the discussions if that door is not as open as it needs to be. So I think I'll just stop there for the moment.
Wonderful, then. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot just for a moment. A little bit of crystal ball gazing.
Not surprising.
A little bit of crystal ball gazing. The future of multi-stakeholderism, the future of multilateralism, how's that going to play out? Because that came through quite often. There was a real sense that multi-stakeholderism was the way forward, but there was a sense of unease in terms of how well it's going to progress. And any feel for that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think multi-stakeholderism is alive and well. And I know there are some naysayers that would say no, but I think it's alive and well. That's what I try to say in some of my comments. It's about getting your voice in, getting participation, engagement. It's not just in, you know, the IETF and the IAB, which are some of the oldest standing models of real openness, multi-stakeholder participation. You see it in the UNESCO, OECD, even in the ITU. You have people proclaiming to be multi-stakeholder, not all are, but you have them proclaiming to be multi-stakeholder because it is the new force. It is recognizing the expectations of individuals. And at the same time, there are forces that will try and pull that back. A lot of them actually use the cybersecurity vector to try and pull some of that back. But, you know, there's so much you could say about cybersecurity and where it starts and where to address it. I think we all need to lean into multi-stakeholderism. I think it's alive and well. I think it's about getting voice and participating. And if we start there, if anybody followed the WSIS 1 and WSIS 2 participation, frankly, we didn't have 4 communities. We didn't have voice. I sat in meetings in the United Nations for weeks at a time to try and get a 3-minute slot because we weren't actually recognized as a stakeholder in the discussion. And look at, you know, where we are now. We actually advanced significantly through WSIS 1 and WSIS 2, hugely through things such as the IGF. And that's lightning fast progress in the political world, and particularly in, you know, the world the UN process is. So I think we've come a long way, and I don't think we're losing steam at all. I think maybe the fact that it's not featured quite so much is because it's much more expected, and it's actually much more ingrained in all of our processes and everything we do today.
Great, thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll move into Q&A. We'll open this up. So we've heard quite a bit about trust. We've heard about cybersecurity, multi-stakeholderism, network issues, networking. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask first, actually, if Constance has any questions from remote. And if we can, yeah, thanks.
Yes, absolutely. We have many questions. There's a lot of discussion going on online. So people are watching. People are definitely reacting. We have Mohammed, for instance, that says that internet governance should be in the hands of governments, but also civil society. So endorsing what Lynn just said, this is what we call the multi-stakeholder governance model. But that conversation needs a home. Could ISOC, as a global platform, facilitate this discussion? Otherwise, the power will lie solely in the government's hands.
Who would like to quick response to that challenge?
I just feel a little awkward here. I'm here.
Nabil, maybe a quick comment.
I mean, I'll take a hit on that. I believe that multi-stakeholderism is really organic and it cannot start upside down. It should be bottom up. Villages were run on the multi-stakeholder model. So now the local communities should be able to do that by themselves within their government based on what would fit their environment. It shouldn't be ups and down. Otherwise, you're going to have, again, the global hierarchy that we have today via the UN, which doesn't work.
Constance, do you have another one?
So we have a follow-up question, another reaction actually from Habib to Hans Peter's comment about freedom of expression. As soon as you start hurting someone on the internet, there should be a mechanism, a way to limit that. And do we all agree with that? Should there be some way of limiting free speech on the internet?
Hans-Peter?
I think you have to find a way to stop things if they are going bad. Even if it's free speech, you are not allowed to do everything just claiming it would be free speech. If it's humiliation, if it's going direct attacks to somebody, I believe it's a human right to stop this. Even if it's a human right to do or to have access to free speech everywhere and at every time, there must be limits. I couldn't imagine how to allow everything just to follow the basic requirement of free speech.
Can I just say, this is actually where society comes in as well, in terms of norms and principles, and again, about the need for individuals to stand up and participate in this discussion and make your views heard, which I know you fully agree with.
Yeah. May I add? Absolutely right, and I believe it's a very complicated thing. It's a thing which has not yet been tackled correctly by technology, because technology couldn't match the multiple rules which are below. Each community, each region, each social group has its own rules, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And finding a right way to do this needs collaboration between social forces and technology to find, perhaps, in the end, methods to do this at least assisted from automatic system. And I, again, going back to our 25 under 25, I saw some very good ideas in these groups, how this could be done and how it could be handled. Not yet finished but we are starting this already.
Thank you. We have one more remote and then we'll go to the room, and I believe we have a roving mic somewhere that we'll bring to the room. Go ahead, Constance.
So Salomon asks a very direct question. What is ISOC concretely doing to address the digital divide and lower cost of access?
You?
Or ask Kathy?
What is ISOC?
Maybe we can...
Raoul?
Yeah,
that's the best.
Raoul, if you can...
Raoul, bring him back. Come on.
Bring him such a long list.
I think you're hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Go ahead.
We are doing a lot of things on that. In fact, there is not a single thing. We have been doing different things during the last 25 years. At this specific moment, we are working very much on, in terms of lowering cost, building infrastructure, community-based infrastructure, IXPs, bringing contents closer to the users, using the IXPs that we help to build and leveling up. But we are also working very much, and everybody knows at this moment, is community networks. And what we are doing with community networks is bringing empowering the community for maintaining their own infrastructure and deploying their own infrastructure, we are doing two things, because we are bringing connectivity to places that the market are not bringing solutions, but at the same time, solutions that are affordable in terms of money. I was in Georgia last week, in Tusheti, the region of Tusheti on the mountains and the Caucasus region. It's a region that is very difficult to access even by road. And when I was there, we were launching a beautiful community network project there, where really the community embraced it. And we didn't have a mobile signal there, but we had internet. So this is part of the things. But we will not connect 3 billion people deploying community networks. But we are demonstrating some things. We are demonstrating that there are already technologies that can be used for connecting the people, so we don't have to wait for magic solutions. That we need to empower the community in order to make those projects to be successful. It's not just bringing wires to the places. It's engaging and empowering the community. And the third thing is that the legal framework should be an enabler for the access and not a barrier. And so we are demonstrating through our work on community network project an approach that can be brought to other areas too. We have to put all the legal framework to work for serving the purpose, the ultimate purpose, that is to bring meaningful connectivity to the people with affordable price. Is part of the equation. Sorry, maybe long speech.
Thanks, Raul. Fantastic. Yeah. And wonderful to hear in all of the comments so far, sort of the way that things operate at multiple levels, from a lot of focus on community and individual communities and bottom-up participation, but also the way things can be enabled through multi-stakeholder fora, laws, and so on. That there's sort of this interaction, that it's not just that it happens in one place or the other, but these changes interact with one another. So let's go to the room now. I think in the center here. Great. I was going to ask to start with someone who is young and mercifully. Could you introduce? You dove right in. Could you introduce yourself?
So my name is Radwa. I'm one of the 25 under 25 awardees, and I want to ask a question regarding the multi-stakeholders and like the way the governance is working right now. So there is always the argument of what supersedes what, state sovereignty versus freedom of expression, and like the ability to have rights for privacy and so on. And the question I have is, who decides what stakeholders are bound to make the decision? So when you talk about stakeholders and like having, like for example, the companies that are very much participating with internet activities, as well as communities, as well as governments, who's going to step up for the decision of, oh, maybe cyber terrorism is a huge thing, and it's now like it's violating state sovereignty, and sometimes on other times when they are doing their investigations, it's violating privacy and like human security and so on. So who decides which stakeholder is going to make this standardization, or who decides who gets to make the governance in this case? Thank you.
So most internet governance discussions actually operate under something called the Tunis Agenda, which was the output from the World Summit on the Information Society 2. And that clearly states that states have sovereignty over their territory, their nation. And this is where the multi-stakeholder aspect comes in so clearly, is that all voices need to participate. There needs to be engagement. Every one of those issues could have, whether it's freedom of expression or it's a cybersecurity issue, is it something that's happening in the network, or is it something that's, a car driving into a crowd of people? We're using so many of these phrases to mean multiple things. They will have different solutions. And so the important thing when you set up an internet governance process or discussion is that you obviously have all the stakeholders engaged, but that you're really clear on where the responsibility for the decision lies up front, and that should be agreed. And sometimes that's as much a part of the debate as is the topic itself. People need to know what process they're playing in, what their expectations ought to be, and how a decision or any output will be treated. And that, again, that should be as much a part of the discussion as the particular topic itself, but it really does depend on which particular.
Can I have an answer on that?
As long as, just try to be brief, because we want to get a couple more questions. Okay. Please.
I believe that Lynn is political in that. In a real democracy, this is multi-stakeholderism. So whenever you have a real democracy, you have multi-stakeholderism. Whenever you have other forms of regimes, then the government cannot be multi-stakeholder. I'm sorry. What?
Hello everyone, my name is Akshay and I'm one of the 25 under 25. So this question is coming straight out of the science fiction. Right? So last night I was watching a NASA channel and it was like the internet speed isn't that much good even at the out of the orbit. So we are planning to go at the Mars and terraforming, go out of the this solar system. So what do you think as a part of the Internet of Things that could happen in the next 25 years so as we can actually expand out of this our planet?
Shall I? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, coming out of science fiction, that's absolutely right, and it's a great question. We didn't manage over the last, I don't know how many thousand years, to find or to even imagine a substantial way to find a faster thing than light on transmission. Somebody was dreaming about quantum computers and having possibilities to be faster in this area, but it's not yet even, let's say, in a cloudy crystal ball visible that it will come through in the next 5 or 10 years. It might come, but nobody can rely on it. And we didn't find things like wormholes or similar concepts to be really faster than the light. And the only thing we can do, we have to adapt to these restrictions. And Windsurf is one of the guys who rather early thought about this. He reminded us at IETF when we designed protocols, think about these protocols must be usable in a mission to Mars. That was 15 years ago, 18 years ago. I'm not quite sure. It's quite some time back, and I'm sure more in the room know or can remember this. And you have to think far in the future, and you have to think far away to solve those problems. I don't see a way to solve it directly. We have to accommodate it. We have to design our protocols, our communication methods around such obstacles like distance, like time. And I'm sorry for the guys who do high-speed trading in a stock exchange. If they have to move their computers to the basement of the stock exchange to be fast enough, sorry for them. That's the limit of the speed of light. We cannot help them. So yes, we have to keep it, and sorry for those who use satellite communication as their only transmission method. It's slow.
Thank you, Hans-Peter. We're going to take 2 more, and then we really do need to move on.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Valentinus Zegas. I'm fighting against misinformation and fake news. And nowadays, the people are losing trust on the internet, on platforms, on the content they consume. And basically, some people are afraid of taking steps backwards on the internet, losing users, losing the trust. So content is king on the internet. So how can we put transparency back on the news, maybe on the whole internet, on the whole content that users consume every day?
I mean, my views, I said them. I believe that we should decide, are we going to support trust or ubiquity? I mean, it is 2 opposite lines. So they cannot be in the same box, in my opinion.
I get 2 comments. I mean, clearly, separate internet and society. Clearly, there are things we can do with some tools that can look for accreditation, a reliable news source, and there are apps that could actually identify that, you know, perhaps the Wall Street Journal is a more reputable source than, you know, Joe's Garage or something. But I actually think society plays a role as well. We all need to really understand what it means to have critical thinking skills and really be taught to really look and examine whether or not this passes, you know, a smell test, if you will. Or is it a site that we know something about? And if not, do we want to look a little bit deeper to really judge whether or not they're So we all need to be much more critical and much more thoughtful in our assessment of what information we're seeing and what are the right sites. I also think we should go back to civics courses for a lot of people as well, because everything we're doing impacts our neighbor, and yet we're somehow forgetting that as well in this great global online.
Thanks. And we're actually going to come back to that question in the next segment, so we'll discuss that some more. To those, we've got one more question here who's had their hand up in the back since the beginning, and I apologize for not seeing you earlier. But for those who want to ask questions, we have another Q&A segment, so don't hesitate then. Yes, well, please.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to get to tee up your next session a bit, because I've been very disturbed about this discussion of trust, because there's an element of it that you keep trying to come back to people. And I'm reminded of two things. One is a quote from my friend Deirdre Mulligan at UC Berkeley, who's made very clear that anytime you start connecting trust to a person, it's because you want to lock them up. And that's not really a trust question. That's a question of incarcerating the body and punishing it. And when you're talking about trust, you're talking instead, and this is a fairly common notion in the security world, about roles. And you touched on one of it. Do you trust the New York Times or Joe's garage, or the Wall Street Journal or Joe's garage? That has nothing to do with the person. And when we talk about trust, we have to, I wanted to see if it changed any of the answers, because several of you were talking about, we have to talk about people. To first order, we don't. We need to talk about roles and in particular instantiations of what they're doing. And there's another small detail, which is a classic joke. A guy gets mad at a service counter and starts yelling and finally says to the clerk, "Do you know who I am?" And the clerk takes out a microphone, and announces throughout the store, "Excuse me, folks, we have someone here at the desk who does not know who he is. Can you come help him?" That's because in his usual life, he's important enough that everybody knew who he was, and in that role, he got privileges. But in the role of the store, he's simply another customer. And we need to distinguish between those rules. You don't need to know who I am. You need to know that I'm a rational source of information about a topic. You don't need to know who I am to judge the speech that I'm putting online or to try to manage certain things. And keeping that distance, I think, is important. And so I know this is a little bit of an opinion, but I also wondered if any of you changed your view about what kinds of trust you want to see, given the notion that what you're really talking about is trusting roles, and that people is a whole different issue, which actually gets wrapped up in issues of incarceration and abuse of views, people for views that are perfectly legit. And I wanted to see if anybody on the panel immediately wanted to recast, or you wanted to punt that to the next session, or whichever.
I'd like a quick response, because I still think it comes down to people. And I didn't use trust in my previous comment, right? I said it's up to all of us to use our own critical thinking skills to assess if what we're seeing meets our own smell test, our own level of credibility, and I still think that's critical.
Well, but that's the consumer side. But we talked about the producer side. And the producer side, there was a discussion of
We're talking about humans. We're talking about humans, no consumers. Because there are lots of humans who are not consumers.
Okay, I will leave it. But I disagree.
Another example of a discussion that can be well suited by taking time and pulling it apart and really understanding what we mean by terms and definitions, and understanding our respective frames of reference.
Okay, we're going to have to move on to the next panel. So thank you very much. A quick round of applause. And if Evelyn, Paola, and Raul could come to the table, that would be great.
Your pen. Oh.
So I was terribly remiss, and I didn't introduce the panelists in the first segment, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. So anyway, we're delighted to have Evelyn Namara, ISOC Policy Outreach Fellow, Paola Corte-Real, who's one of the 25 Under 25 Award, and Raul Echeverria, who needs no introduction, but ISOC's Vice President for Global Engagement. Evelyn, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I will be speaking about the recommendations, and all right, I will have them up on the slides. Yeah, so there's 10 recommendations, obviously, and that's so many of them. So right now, I'll just focus on a few of the conversations I had with the 25 Under 25s and part of my experiences and how that ties into the recommendations that we have. And one of the key aspects while speaking to most of the 25 under 25s that came out really strongly and that has been articulated from the previous panel is the need to act very urgently on bridging the gap on digital divides, right? So many of you were speaking so very passionately about that in terms of we need to move very, very, very urgently on the matter of digital divides. And I happen to work with a lot of youth back home, and I've seen how just even having the most limited connection can do to different people in different setups. So it's very, very key to ensure that that's key. Raul just talked about the infrastructure development, so it's very important to start prioritizing that, especially in places where we have limited access. I come from Uganda, Africa, of course, the continent, we still have so many people who are still offline, so it's important to bridge that gap. But then also one other issue in terms of digital divides is to also think about that it's no longer just the digital divide between Africa and the wealthier countries, but also looking at the digital divides between some of the countries within Africa that you have the leading and lagging countries. So sometimes even within the same continent, you have other countries that are more progressive and others that are still lagging behind. So what can we collectively do to ensure that we are all on the same level and not leaving anyone behind? So that's a recommendation that came out really, really strongly. And then another one that came out very strongly is the one for human rights. And I will touch on shutdowns. Hans spoke about it earlier, and I was privileged to be at the Africa Internet Summit in May, where the Internet Society had a nice roundtable session that we had with the youth in the room. And we had over 40 of these young people. And one of the questions that we asked was, what does the internet mean to you, and why is it important for it to be kept on? And we had all of these discussions, and one thing that came out very closely is that most of them said the internet is home. That's all they know, and that's all they've lived to know. So it's very important for us to send a message to governments and say, you need to leave the internet on, you need to switch it on, because most of these people, some of their examples are they're looking at new business models online. They're just finding different ways of solving so many problems within their communities. And they are connecting beyond borders. Most of the 25ers were also saying that, collaborating beyond borders. So it's very, very important to keep that aspect also in check. So those two were very, very key. And of course, the issue about human values that Lynn has spoken very articulately about that I don't even want to go deeply into. But yeah, those are some of the very key recommendations that I wanted to speak about.
Wonderful. One of the, if I may, one of the by the way, just so everybody's clear, these are the recommendations from the report. And each one of these 10 has a series of recommendations, specific recommendations under them. So and it's definitely worthwhile looking at them. A lot of thought and community input went into them. One of the issues there, Evelyn, is also the importance of the role of civil society. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could just touch on that a little bit in your interactions and how we see that evolving.
Definitely. I think right now it's very key to say that empowering people is going to be key. As we look at new technologies, empowering people is definitely going to be key. And civil society is playing a major role in putting all of these issues in terms of, even when you look at shutdowns, when they happen, you'll find that civil society is taking the lead in saying, this is not right and we need to move forward. So there's a force of civil society, and there's a lot that they're doing in terms of pushing and making sure that all of the different roles are met and every single person is kept into check. But also to say that each one of us has a role, and we have to be empowered to be part of the whole internet ecosystem and the technology ecosystem. So civil society plays a major role in that.
And I think that also connects with the digital divides, right? We talk about the sort of infrastructure and access divide as being maybe the first divide, but then it's the usefulness, it's the local content, as we heard from Mauritius, it's the sort of media literacies and fluencies to be able to use the technologies. Yep. So I feel like the connection that I'm hearing you make is that we need civil society to really actively engage in the multiple ways that we do as users, as organizers, as conveners, and talking about these issues.
Absolutely, yeah. And just also to add on that, all the connections really matter. So if you have the infrastructure in place, but you don't have meaningful access like you talked about, but also advancing the skills. I mean, most of the people who need to be online, you have to have the relevant skills to ensure that you join a global conversation and you're actually relevant when you're online. So there's also a need to build the relevant skills of people who are getting online to ensure that everyone definitely comes on board and no one is left behind, but you also have the relevant skills.
Maybe that takes us nicely to Paola. Maybe you can talk a little bit about one of the issues that's come up often is the issue of the differences between online and offline behavior, or the lack of differences. And in fact, some behaviors are seeping into the online space. And how do we bring discourse and civility and to address the point that was raised earlier? How do we manage this online space and bring back some of what Lynn was talking about, the need to get back to civics and understanding human relationships?
Just a modest question.
Yeah, not a big one.
Not a tough one. I think we have to make the internet a safe place, free from hate and from violence, and especially for women. I mean, women from developing countries are not only the majority of those who are not connected, but they are also a group very vulnerable online. So we do have to make sure that every stakeholder engage on that and address this point by taking responsibility on the use of the internet. So I really think that actually internet is a mirror, as we've seen in the report. So it basically brings hate that we already have offline, online. So the thing is, when a person is behind a keyboard, as I said yesterday, they're more likely to be aggressive. So we really need to bring the values that we have offline, online. So this is also about human rights, as Evelyn said. So I think we should have like a really engagement from all stakeholders to address this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think this connects with the previous conversation about sort of welcoming, of course, and protecting and enshrining free expression as a fundamental right, but also recognizing that and mirror may be one way to describe the internet, but I also hear you saying kind of amplifier, in the sense that people may be even less civil online than they are off.
Yes, that's a real problem, as Han said earlier, because we have a real thin line between hate speech and freedom of expression. So that's a really hard test to address in this point. We can't really stop like hate speech undermining personal rights, freedom, but in the same way you can't like speak freely without consequences with hate speech and violence online. So this is a point that really needs to have engagement from stakeholders, really like from internet platforms, from civil society, from end users, for them to really know how to use the internet, how to make it a tool for good and not just spread hate and violence online.
And I just want to pick up on one thing that you said, and you can comment or not, is just to note how gendered these threats are. In particular, and I think as a room that has, no offense, but a lot of older men in it, I think we haven't always heard the challenges to women in a real way, and haven't always acted on them. And so I think you're waving that flag to us and saying, you may not have experienced this the way that we do and the way that all these at-risk populations do.
Yes, of course. And me as a young woman who truly believes in gender equality, I think that when we talk about gender issues online, we have to see that there's a big difference between harassment, between violence, between all the experiences women have online. So this is a really important issue to bring and to talk about. From the 25 and under 25, I've seen a lot of great women. They're really awesome young women who are working on that. I've seen a lot of projects related with gender, digital gender gap, and trying to bridge that, trying to empower women. We have Rawa from Egypt that was working with refugees. I mean, it's really good to see that young people are really engaged to that kind of problem we have.
Wonderful. Maybe we can move to Raul. And there was a question of the broader impact on society, and one of the impact areas in the report was media and society. And maybe, Raul, you can just comment a little bit on the challenges that we may face in society in the future, and particularly perhaps from a kind of a jobs or employment or opportunity perspective. And then I'd like to bring that question back to the other panelists as well.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm in troubles now because speaking after those two excellent speakers is not easy. Let me make a quick comment about something before addressing your question. That is building over something that Evelyn spoke about in the closing digital divide. I think it's a kind of tweet that we could use, but the world is working under the assumption that everybody is connected. And that's not the case. So the half of the population is not connected yet. So this is the real gap, is the gap on opportunities. That's that the people that is not connected is not doesn't have access to the opportunities that are available on the internet, and to many services, applications, everything, because that's most of us are thinking in a world that everybody is connected. So we share information about over our social networks, and we post things on Facebook or so. But so only the people that is already on board is the one that is seeing that. Same with many other examples. Speaking specifically about job, and I was talking to Linda yesterday. That's one of our under 25 awardees about this issue. That this is being repeated everywhere, that the existing shops, 60% of the existing shops will disappear with the new technologies. I'm sure this is true, but I think that this is only half of the truth. And the other half is that we have a lot of opportunities, and if we see the report, there are a lot of mentions to promoting and developing the skills that the people need for participating in the digital economy and accessing works. But it's also it's not only thinking about what are the digital skills we think today that the people need. It's because I'm sure that in 5 years, the skills needed will be absolutely different. Probably in 10 years or less than 10 years, nobody will be using smartphones. That will be a different reality. And it's about checking all the time what are the skills that we need to develop in the society for giving opportunities to the people, not only to be part of, to access to the new shops, but also to create new shops, to be part of the evolution. This is what all this discussion has been about: shape tomorrow, shaping the future. We cannot be just observers. We have to be part of that. We need to empower the people, all the people, to be part of this transformation. So I think that yes, there will be a huge impact in the society, and a lot of jobs will disappear. But it's up to us to be part also of the construction of the new opportunities, new jobs, and this is the things where we have to focus on: how to empower the community, what are the skills we need to develop in order to give people opportunities.
Thank you. So one of the things I wanted to raise was Joyce earlier on, when she went around the globe, she highlighted some of the findings and the calls to action that you may have noticed them in the little pink boxes. And we will capture those because they're a wonderful complement and addition to the recommendations that are in the report. But one in particular kind of stands out, and I think I'd like to put the question to the panel here, and it was from the node in Johannesburg. And in that little pink box it said, "The internet is only a tool. Decide how to apply it for our future." And I think that's a really interesting question. So what is we're talking more about the individual and the society here. What are our individual and societal responsibilities in terms of the use of the internet? And is technology getting away from us, or can we have more of a say? In the report we talk about being more user-centric and humanity being at the center of the internet. And maybe if you can just speak quickly to that, and then we'll go to questions. Or Evelyn, or...
Okay, the answer is yes. This always the people is in the center of all our work, and you made a lot of questions in one question.
I'm good at that. It's tricky. You can take any part you want.
Yeah. But so about the individual responsibility, yes, I think that's this is. I will put something on different thing. There is a concept that is a concept of authority. That is it's not the same than power, right? It's a different thing. I think that we are in a kind of crisis at this moment about the authority. In other times, the sources of authority have been much more clear. But I think that this is just part of the change. I think that we will find that at some point. We will find again what are the sources of authorities for the society. I think that we have a responsibility on that. And in fact, I find very interesting all the discussion about fake news and all the work that our D from Greece is doing. And so, but I think that's what will happen now is that in a short time we will be questioning everything. So we will assume, because we come from a time that's where we assumed that what was published in the newspaper or what we saw on TV was true. Okay, at least it had some level of credibility or legitimacy. Okay, now we are trying to deal with this transformation, and we don't know what to do. I think that what will happen in a very short time is that we will give no legitimacy to anything, and we will question everything until we find those new sources of authorities. But it is part our own behavior and the responsibilities that we take in this new world are part of that path toward finding or building this new reality.
Evelyn, Paula?
Yeah, I will tackle it quite differently. If you see, when I look at people and look at society, and especially from that comment specifically from South Africa, what I see, especially in the continent, is that you'll find that people are starting to look at issues within their community and wondering, what can I do? What's my role in solving that issue? So we find that a lot of things, our individual responsibilities is like you go out and see a problem and then start figuring out, what can I do to actually address this issue? And most of that then drives into what we see growing up, especially in the Eastern and Southern Africa, the innovation space, where people are now looking at what's the new business model of solving the same issue, but using technology as an enabler for that. And so we see lots of people then looking to the internet and saying, we can use the internet to solve some of the issues that we see today. So it's more like people looking at these issues and finding out, what's my role in solving them? If I can't solve them, how can I mobilize people together and say, we have an issue here, and how can then technology be an enabler for us to get to a solution that we need? Yeah.
Well, I think I got it. I think I got it right, the code you said, but at first you said like internet as a tool. that the person said that internet is a tool. That connects a little bit with what I just mentioned, that internet is the mirror that reflects society. So as Evelyn also said, that people find a way to use the internet for a positive outcome, for good, because they fight like root causes. They try to address causes that are offline. So internet is only enabling. And sometimes we blame like the internet for something that we do offline. So I think I got this quote as internet as a tool like that, because I really think that sometimes we need to fight the root causes and don't blame the platform or the internet itself. So I got like that.
Good point.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, great point. Okay, so we're going to open it up. We're going to go to remote, but before we go to remote, I'm going to give the opportunity. Is it Linda? If you have a question, do you want to ask a question? Okay, perfect. Can we? Because I cut her short earlier on. If we have a mic.
A victim of her own courtesy, as it happens.
Thank you. I'm Linda, one of the 25 under 25 awardees. I think that I haven't spoken a lot, but it's just that it's really important for me in case to talk about trust and talk about the power that some governments are acquiring to make an alliance with mass information media. And this is a really urgent issue because I am a journalist too. I know how media works, but it's kind of really worrying know that there are some people in the shadows with enough power to publish a lie and let the people think a lie. Even if people is just getting news more critically, I think that there's a lot of things as gap, as internet access that many people are incapable of understanding this critically. So I think that there should be any way that multi-stakeholders start acting against this, because this is not user responsibility. It's beyond that. It's beyond, because it's manipulation of power from great organizations, companies, governments, and this is really dangerous. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to go to remote first, and we'll come back to the room.
So there's still a lot of activity in the groups that are online, a lot of discussion about the need for balanced participation on the internet. One comment that religions are absolutely not involved in these discussions, and a question about how to get them involved. Shridep also says youth needs to step up and empower itself. How can we make that happen?
Well, here we had a lot of great examples of young people working actively to make sure that we have like internet as a tool for good. So I think the way that we can do that is by paying it forward. I really believe that one young people can empower another young people. They share sometimes the same thoughts or the same fears, so they really connect with each other. So I've been experiencing with my project, I went to public schools in my community to try to deliver some information, to have an open dialogue about internet, about technology, about the devices they use, about the use they have, and the relation that they have with technology and with internet. So the way I think we can achieve that, we can really bring people into action, is by doing that, is by creating a network. I mean, we have like 25 other people, young people, like that really inspire me. The other 24 inspire me. I'm going out of here like really optimistic about it, because I've seen that we have strong and great leaders around the world that can do that can pay it forward. And I really think that's the way that we can empower young people, is by sharing.
Constance, one more?
So one more. Mark also talks about the divide in people's behavior on and offline. He says it's easy to be aggressive online while you might hesitate before punching someone in the face in the real life. Do we need new norms to address the issue of social behavior online?
Would like to take that. New norms for social behavior online. Oh.
Okay, I think it's very difficult. I heard what Hans-Peter said in the previous panel about limits to the. In fact, I think that is intrinsic to the human rights, that the human rights have the limits of the by themselves. But I don't think that's really feasible to force those norms and behaviors norms. I'm very optimistic in the sense that the own society will put those limits in the same way that we managed that, but it took centuries to develop the societal norms. So it's wrong if you insult somebody on the street. So you can do it. In fact, many people do it, but it's wrong, and everybody knows that it's wrong. I think this is part of what I say before about the transformation. I think that we are developing that new culture. The internet is very young, and so we are dealing. In fact, many of us we were born before the internet, so we joined the internet already as adults. So I think that is in their hands probably to develop this new culture, and not only in their hands, the hands of the people that is 5 years old today. That's I'm optimistic that the own society will put the limits to this difference of behavior in the offline and online.
Good. Okay, so let's go to the room. Yep, we have a question in the.
And just noting that there are a bunch of hands up and we're sort of running out of time, we would invite you to try to be concise in your questions so that we can get as many as possible in.
I'm obviously one of those old white guys who was referred to earlier.
Lovingly, to be clear.
I'm sure, although in my case, one never knows.
And tell us who you are.
My name is.
You have to ask.
Thank you, Craig. My name is John Clenson. And I have been around the internet and its predecessors for a very, very long time. And I don't think that conveys any authority for wisdom, but it does convey some for history. I look at a list like this as recommendations for the future of society and the world, and I am just fine with it. Although, like probably everyone else in this room, I would quibble about or ask about what some of the words mean in some of those statements. But this is a lovely utopian statement about the future. But I want to go back to the things which got us to here with regard to technology and the network. And that involved a few social principles, very few of which have anything to do with what's on the board, and a couple of technical principles. And the two key technical principles, one of them has to do with the difference between packet networks and circuit networks, which we don't have to worry about in this conversation. And the other has to do with the network being absolutely stupid about the information it's carrying. And as you look at lists like this and think about a network which is absolutely stupid about the information it's carrying as a key design principle which makes it work, let's be a little careful that we don't confuse societal issues, which are great ideas, with tampering with the internet in ways which interfere with that principle about neutrality of what it's carrying. Not merely neutrality about what it's carrying, but ignorance about what it's carrying. Because to remind you of a Western European fairy tale, there is a goose here which is laying golden eggs, and fixing it is often not a good idea. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. We're going to. Can we go to the other side, just so we? Yes, there's a gentleman in the middle there.
Yes.
G'day. I'm Ash. I'm from Australia. My question is, in Australia, we've worked with like 200,000 young people, asking them what the issues are in the online world for them as consumers. And overwhelmingly, they say that it's a social issue that's playing out in a technological space. And a lot of the conversations we've had lately around the technology, and a lot of the recommendations aren't. They're about social norms, future, empowerment, human rights. And I wonder, if any, do you think technology plays any role or responsibility in creating social norms in the online world?
Who'd like to take that? No?
No.
Colin? I mean, and I think we should use the room here, too.
Yeah.
If there's someone who wants to respond, you're welcome. What I would say is I mean, design matters, right? The way that if you think about, sort of go back to Larry Lessig's code, law, norms, and markets, all these different forces guide our behaviors. And so to say that it's just social norms as the only driver wouldn't be accurate. I think the way that the technologies are built, designed, deployed, the user experience, all the different features engender sort of the range of experiences that we have. So I think that goes back to me, to Lynn, and also to Hans-Peter, talking about sort of the interaction of these different perspectives and why it's so important to have the different actors at the table as you try to like understand these wicked problems and the interconnectedness of all these different forces that act on us as individuals.
I'm getting a time sign from in the back. So I'm going to take two more. So the young lady in the front here.
Thank you. My name is Mary Hilda Kwong and I'm from Uganda. Evelyn, you have been talking about involving different stakeholders in promoting the internet and closing the digital divide. Now, I'm a bit worried about dictatorial governments that are not so eager to promote this tool because it could bring a lot of problems for them, like Uganda, for example, where we come from. Yeah, but then how do you think do you think we can do most of the work without so much involvement from the internet, from the government? Is it possible?
Thank you so much, Mary. It's definitely possible. I think there's a rise of youth who are, I think one of the questions they asked was, what can youth do for themselves? And my response to that is that youth are looking at all of these issues that we are facing today online and taking a stand, especially from the civil society perspective, to say, these are the rights that we need and we have to fight for them. And so I see lots of young people right now taking that step and saying, where you have government suppressing people are standing up and saying, these are our rights and we have to demand them. So you have to reach a point where you have to demand what is rightfully yours. And there's a movement that builds around that when a cause is really good and people start following that, and you can cause real change out of those causes. And I could give so many examples of how that has happened, especially even back home in Uganda. But yes, we can see lots of people moving forward and the youth driving the change. So it's definitely possible. Yep.
There was a question. Yes, this Jen. Yes. And I'm afraid that's going to be the last one.
The conversation can surely carry on at lunch.
Hello, I'm Ed Kroll. I'd just like to put some perspective on the digital divide thing. Sort of, in the grand scheme of things, we've been working on this 25 years, we got half done, and it's an asymptotic thing, and the closer we get to getting everybody connected, the harder each additional point is. And I like to draw parallels to eradicating polio. It's like, there are 50 years we've been trying to get rid of polio, and in 30 years, 95% of the world is polio free, and the last 5% is a real dog because nobody cares. And the same thing is going to happen with the digital divide, because when everybody's connected, the people who are in mountainous Afghanistan are not going to get it because they're going to be off the radar to everybody else.
Would like to take that?
Rob? Yes, I agree 100%. But I think that we are still very far from that point where that will be very difficult to reach the next 1%. I think that there are still a lot of things that we can do for connecting massively more people. bringing internet to the education systems. I think that's in fact the Sustainable Development Goals that give us a great opportunity for working with governments and other stakeholders, because now we are not longer talking about just connecting people. We are talking about improving the health services, improving education, reducing the gender inequity. So we still have the possibility to develop some public policies that can change the reality. I'm sure, yes, probably when we reach 90% of people connected, it will be very difficult to achieve 91. But I think that we are still far from that.
Just to add one small bit to that, I mean, I think we heard in the from the nodes in the report how important it is to not to be aware that this gap will exacerbate the divides that we already have, not just reinforce them, but in fact make them worse. So it becomes increasingly critical as we get to those last folks around the world who aren't connected, to give them that option, to give them that opportunity, so that we don't kind of create a bigger gap than the one that already exists.
And if I may, I would also say I think it's important, I completely understand. I think it's also important, however, that we do continue to aspire to connect everybody, because that's how we may come, as Raul was saying, we'll come up with new policies, that's how we may find new technologies. And I don't think that's something we should lose sight of. Anyway, I think we have to draw it to a close here. Thank you very much.
Let's thank these folks.
Yeah, let's thank these. Please, a round of applause for the great panel.
You guys can sit back down in comfortable chairs.
And I think we're going to turn it over now to the chair of the ISOC board, who's going to give us his thoughts. Gonzalo is going to give us his thoughts on the future for the organization. I think we're going to have another video at some point in time, and then Gonzalo is going to introduce Kathy to wrap us up, and we'll have a video after that as well. So we're going to turn it over to you. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, please a round of applause for the moderators. Yeah, great job. Okay, thank you. First of all, well, as they said, I'm going to share a few thoughts with you. We will be watching a video, and then I'll have Kathy, wrap up the whole session and the whole 3 days, actually. So quite exciting. First, let me set the tone. I got here this morning, and I mean, to be honest, the room looked very sad. People were kind of, yawning, getting coffee. And I checked Brussels. These guys have been up all night, and they're partying, giving everything. So I thought we had a problem, actually. So we have fixed that. After this, we're going to be toasting out there, and, we'll have a little party. We had like a few minutes to organize it. So thanks, guys, for, running around and managing to put together the sparkling wine and everything. So we'll do that afterwards and before lunch. So let's hope that fixes the tone a bit. Because at the end of the day, this is a celebration. So, I don't want us to look too serious, although some of the topics, obviously, they are very important and very serious. So having said that, first of all, I want to say that I think the whole event has been great. But of course, I would say that anyway. So the reason I'm saying that is like many people actually throughout these 2-3 days, they have actually come to me and say, thank you, this is great. And I really, some of them meant it. But at some point I thought that it was a bit weird because they were thanking me and the board. And I think that's, a clear misunderstanding. So to be clear, who should take the credit of all this? When we started planning this, like 1 year back probably, we had a conversation, the board had a conversation with Kathy and staff, and usually the board actually gives strategic guidelines. So all we said was, we don't want just to look at the past, right? So, I mean, this is where we come from, and this is important, but we should actually link it to the future. So in that sense, that was kind of the overarching scheme and theme for these 3 days, and everything else is really, I mean, the credit goes to Kathy and all the staff. They have done a tremendous job, and I don't really want, any of the credit to come to us, because it's really, their thing. So please, join me. And I'm saying Kathy and the staff because I don't want to start saying names because I will for sure forget someone. So that would be bad. So that's important. As I said, the theme for the 3 days was linking together the past with the present and with the future. And I think it was good. So let me summarize real quick. We had the Hall of Fame. That's looking a bit into the past. I mean, these great people that they have, basically accomplished so much. Some of them pioneers of the internet. And then we had the 25 under 25. This really looking into the future, present and future. The people that we will take. I mean, will take us. Not only the next 25 years, but even in the short term, actually, looking into that. And then we had what it was discussed right now, the Future of Internet report. And that was actually also very interesting because this is actually the outcome of kind of the last years, like ISOC has been working on that, and it actually sets that into the present and the immediate priorities that we have to tackle. So I would like to, before I continue, to watch a quick video, so summarizes all these 3 events and these 3 days in LA. So that we can watch it together, and I think, I mean, the guys did a great post-production job with the video, so I hope you enjoyed. So, please.
It's my pleasure this evening to welcome you all to our 25th anniversary celebration dinner.
The Internet Society supports many programs that help young people build their skills and to make sure your voices are heard in the important conversations about the Internet.
We announced that the Internet Society would open its doors in January of 1992. The big issue now is how to make sure that the Internet stays accessible, stays affordable, continues to grow, and that's why all of you are important.
We're passing on the cloak of responsibility, creativity, and, if you will, fun of driving the Internet, because it's those young folks that are going to determine the legacy and the direction of this upcoming Internet.
For someone like me, if I didn't know about the Internet, I wouldn't have been able to execute my ideas and make it happen.
There's a huge portion of the population that now has access to the Internet. Making sure that everyone is given an equal and open voice is one of the most important aspects.
I'm super honored to be here, and I couldn't have thought I would ever make it. So I really hope this provides a chance for people to move forward and to have an opportunity to give back to their society as much as I want to do.
We cannot forget about the billions who are not yet online. And of course, we're all working together to change that, including some of our Internet Hall of Famers and our 25 under 25 awardees today.
Of all the reports that the Internet Society has published, this is undoubtedly the most far-reaching, because it was for more than a year that thousands of people from more than 100 countries were contacted for their opinions and their analyses about what they thought was going to happen to the Internet of the future and how they could affect change in that future.
The Internet is going to become much more critical and important to our daily lives. It will be a utility that we depend on, that we think is very important to every aspect of our daily lives, keeping us on track, keeping our airline reservations, helping with the education of our children.
The Internet Society founded the Internet Hall of Fame in 2012 as a recognition program that honors Internet visionaries and innovators.
You are the future, and the future is now.
So I think it's a very nice video, and it basically summarizes, what we went through the last days. After basically giving the award to the 14, well, the 12 that made it here, in the Internet of the Hall of Fame, I was actually told that I shouldn't complain because they didn't put me on high heels on the stage. So I guess it could have been worse. But I think it was a nice ceremony, and in particular, people seem to have liked a lot the dinner we had the previous day, where we had all the young guys and basically, you know, the more experienced guys, let's say, you know, sitting together. We basically arranged the tables like that. So I think that was quite interesting, you know, quite successful. So, as I said, this has been about linking past with present and the future. So now I'm going to be using very few minutes, but just looking into the future. So let me start dividing this in three parts. What is now, the short term, and the long term for Internet society. So now, the first thing is obviously the recommendations of the report. We just saw, you saw 10 bullets, and you know, they tackle, you know, cybersecurity, they talk about human values. That was something like a recurring theme that people have, especially when talking about Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, things like that. People feel that technology is actually going faster than society. So we don't have ethical answers to some of the questions that technology is posing us. So I think that's actually quite important, and it's actually tackled in the report. Cybersecurity, we had the digital divide that's also coming up all the time. So please have a look at the whole report, the executive summary, the full report, the recommendations, because I think it's quite interesting. So that's kind of the now. One of the videos that they prepared as well, and it was discussed in the ceremony of, you know, when we were basically releasing the report, was the hopes and fears video. Probably you remember people were saying, you know, hopes like, you know, social change. People were fearing, I don't know, my fear, for example, one of them was like, you know, winner takes all markets, where, you know, some entities, they have too much power. So let me share with you another fear that, you know, we didn't include it in the video, but it's just a personal reflection. This morning I was reading the press, and they were talking about a regional institute in Spain. I'm from Spain, so I was reading the Spanish press before reading other newspapers. And they talk, this is for substance abuse and substance addiction. And this has been done in other parts of the world, you know, already, but, you know, I was reading it this morning in this particular regional institute that they have added actually addiction to the internet to what they are doing. And that takes me that in ISOC, typically it's been like, you know, more connection is good, getting people more connected is good, more hours is good, more online is good. And that's not true anymore in some parts of the world. In others, it's absolutely true. So in that sense, this reflection that, you know, sometimes it's not about maximizing or minimizing a variable, it's about finding the sweet spot. And I think when we were talking before about freedom speech or hate speech, and it's really, that's the problem, that it's not about maximizing or minimizing, it's finding a sweet spot. So in that sense, we recognize also that the problems that different regions are facing are very different. It's not the same being North Europe. I live in North Europe, for example, in Finland in particular, than, you know, in Uganda that was mentioned before. Very different problems. So just to tackle that in the present, we are actually beefing up our regional operations. So our regional operations of ISOC, as you know, you can think of this as a matrix, right? I mean, we have people working on technology, policy, etc., and then we have regions. So we thought that basically we need more muscle behind our regional efforts. So that's something that we're going to be starting doing now, because I think, and the board thinks, that that's actually quite important. So that's, as I said, the now, let's say. What's happening in the short term? The way we work, the board works with the executive team of ISOC in order to set strategies. As I said, the board usually, you know, sets strategies, and basically staff is executing them. Is to work on 3-year plans. So the last 3-year plan was basically, you know, planned 3 years ago. So it's basically finishing now. So we are working on putting together the next 3-year plan. You know, if I have to summarize in 2 words, the last 3-year plan was access and trust. This is, you know, Hans-Peter's little flower that he was talking about before. we have several activities, of course. I mean, you could summarize it in more detail, but I think that that's enough, right? Getting people to access the internet, being able to access it, and so that people have trust on the network. And following up actually John's comment, John Clancy's comment before, I fully agree with you, because the first time I saw trust, I hated that, because I said that's exactly the opposite. We build a network that you don't need to trust, and with all the end-to-end principles you explained, it works anyway, even if you don't build that. And we had discussions, and it's exactly what you said. It's not the same talking about the technology than about the human factor. So while I still think that it should be an untrustworthy network that you are able to operate, we should build actually trust at the human level. So that was a very good point, and I always stress that you have to be explicit and very clear when talking about that. Otherwise, we could have big misunderstandings. So having said that, access and trust, we are working with staff. I don't think it's worthwhile that I go a bit more into details into the next 3-year plan, because it's basically different buckets, how we're going to allocate resources, things like that. I don't think this is the venue to discuss that. A bit more interestingly would be what we are doing more in the long term. So the more long term we go, the more a board issue it is, and the less staff issue. Staff, they need to be there in the trenches working and implementing the strategy. So what we are doing into the future, and all of you have been involved actually, is that following the theme of linking the past into the future, we have the vision of ISOC, we have what we call mission, but they are more like a bunch of guiding principles. So we wanted to basically get a common sense of ownership in the whole community, but the community now, with the young people that are working, also with our old-timers, everyone together. So I think the process to come up with, what is ISOC's mission is very important. We have been working, the board, with staff, running workshops. Now we are talking actually, as we speak, we are having conversations with the chapters, the organizations. We are starting to talk to the ITF as well. So all our community is actually sending us feedback. If you haven't actually done so, please, check the mailing list of the chapters, organizations, ITF, whatever community you're in. And that's very exciting, because as I said, I'm not so concerned with the actual output, but just to get a common sense of ownership. So we don't believe, well, yeah, this is what some guys came up with, 25 years ago, and that's kind of okay. I want people to live that, to feel this is my mission, this is what we are doing. And we also want to have a mission that is concise and memorable, so people can say, this is the mission. As opposed to this is all the things we do, the list of 3,000 things we are doing. So in that sense, that's the goal we have. I repeat, get a common sense of ownership in the whole community, and that's what we are trying to do. The feedback we got so far, some people like it, some people love it. We are getting constructive feedback, but I think it's really good, as I said, the whole exercise to come up with something that we are all comfortable with. So I think this is the most important activity for the board right now. Think that also ISOC, the amount of resources we have, we can make a huge impact. So it's really important to be able to focus on the right things and basically, not just run activities, because we can run a lot of activities, but just, decide what we do, what we don't do, and basically focus on that. So it's really about focus, about, dropping things, and about, doubling down on what's important. So I'm not going to tire you more with any other, ideas, because I want to keep you, holding that thought. Then when we are toasting and having lunch, feel free to approach me, Kathy, any member of the board, and I will be happy to talk to you guys. Also, I've been giving you my cards. I'm very easy to reach, so feel free also to reach out, send an email, and we'll be able to talk to all of you. And having said that, I would like to introduce Kathy Brown, our CEO. She's going to wrap up the whole event. So, please.
So here we are at the end. It's been a wonderful 3 days, and I hope that you, like me, have used it to talk to others, to open your own minds and your own hearts to what it is you can do, but also what it is other parts of our amazing community can help you do together. And I watched as the energy of our young people infected this entire 3 days and listened very carefully to the accomplishments of those who have come before you, remembering that everything you do is on their shoulders. And someone said, well, it's not just about bits, but without the bits, you don't have what you have. And so without the energy, we may lose the ability to use this amazing tool, as you said, you described it, that allows us to do so many things in life. So I want to give you 2 thoughts as we leave here. One is that nothing gets done unless you're happy warriors. Part of having a party is not just to have a party, it's to connect on a very human level, to say we are all in this together, and I like that you're standing right next to me. And when I see what happened around the world in those 24 hours and realize those are us, that is us, that's us, that's ISOC. We are everywhere. There is nowhere I go in the world that someone doesn't walk up to me and say, I belong to ISOC, I have this card. It is a badge, it is a badge of honor to be part because it means something. It means that the community is committed to something much bigger than any one of us, of any one of those places on that globe. We are committed to this notion that the internet is for everyone because the internet can be a force for good, is a force for good in the world. So first idea, happy warriors, smiles on our faces, community, we keep building it. Build it, build it, build it. And that means trust in each other and happiness to be with each other. Why do we need that right now? Because we are at an urgent time, and this is going to be my second message to all of us. We are at a fragile moment. Things could happen here that could bring us right off the vision that we see and the one we share together. There are forces who do not like this. There are forces who want to exploit this tool for their own interests. There are forces that say, let's not do this anymore. Let's chop this thing up. Let's keep it inside the boundaries that we're very, very comfortable with. We don't know about these kids talking to somebody else across the world. What in heaven's name would get in their heads? Well, what we know is we're beyond that. We're already beyond that. We're already speaking to each other. And it is a global community that we need to recognize, understand our cultural differences, understand that there's different requirements around the world to use this tool in different ways, but to accept the fact that its global nature, the fact that we can get anywhere, is part of its very nature. If we go back to chopping it up, we go backwards. And there's this moment now in my mind that we need to come together as happy warriors to understand the urgency of the moment. So why did we celebrate these 25 years the way we did? Well, it's to make sure that ISOC is strong. Just think of the human assets we have. Just think of what you just saw now. Just look at what's already organized, what's already on the ground. 129 chapters. We are now regionally in all parts of the world, just about. We have a commitment from our board to give us more resources, to strengthen those resources around the world. And we're set to do something here that's important. And that is to go forward with the vision we have in a way that we stand up for it. I think I was misunderstood before because Nabal made such a statement that my hand went up and I said, he's right. We cannot hide. There is no more hiding around this issue. We can't hide. We're either for this or someone else is going to decide what to do with this internet. The internet society is an odd thing, isn't it? The kids go like to me, what do you do all day? And I say, well, we defend the internet. You defend the internet. The internet's just there. Why does it need defending? That is the problem, guys. There is a notion that it doesn't need defending, that it's going to always be there like electricity or the air. Not so. Because while that network may be built to be neutral, it is not neutral. The implications of it are not neutral. The implications of a global network are not neutral. Do we want a globally connected network? Do we want one that is open? That is not a neutral notion. Do we want one that is secure? Not a neutral notion. I'm not going to argue about whether we should keep the ability to do whatever we do for a useful purpose on that network. I think we want to. And I think the distinguishing thing that our technologists are telling us is an important thing. But the implications of the thing itself are why you and the young folks called it home. That's a pretty strong thing. When I stood and heard young people say, this is home, that's not neutral. Because home is where I live. So, there's some urgency here. We have to take our community and we have to say, do you want to stand with the internet? And if you do, what do we do about it? This report, while I agree, when you read those recommendations, feels pretty, like every other report that says things could be better if these things happen. Go into it, though. There's some press today that understood it much better and said this report actually from the Internet Society is pretty interesting because it says this can go in different directions. This really could go in different directions. And it's laid out pretty starkly here. And it's meant to do that, to put the choice before us and to say, where do we want to go? Now, we don't go anywhere alone. We just don't. We just don't. In addition to these chapters, 103,580 people, Lynn, have now said they want to be members of the Internet Society. We have to make that membership. They went on our website and they put their name and they put their email address and said, we want to be members of the Internet Society. Who has 103,580 people as of today who are ready to do and say and stand up for something? We ought to use that, no? We ought to get people engaged, figure out how to make that all happen. All of your networks, think about your networks, that's times 10. So, as we move ahead and as we think about what the next thing is, the next 25, what do we have to do? And Gonzalo's call for let's fill that out. Let's understand our overall message. Let's see if we're in this together. See if we can come to a common understanding of what is now required to put some meat on some of those bones and decide to focus and decide we are going to make a difference, that we're not going to hide, that we're going to be present, visible, and we're going to make a difference. So, with that, let me thank you. It's been a terrific 3 days. We have work to do. Let's be happy doing it. Let's keep each other's hands and hold them. Let's argue. Let's push back. Let's get it right. But then, for goodness sakes, let's move. We don't have a lot of time. There's thoughtful work that needs to be done, but it needs to be done. And so we need to get going. With that, ready? We thought we'd end with a little bit about, some heartstrings about the Internet Society. And then we'll go have lunch. Thank you. before I leave? I won't go through all the, I hope you have going to roll before you roll the credits, this whole thing and our new website and our ad campaign was done by the staff of the Internet Society and together with the community. They are an amazing bunch and can show what you do. When you put your mind to something and decide it's going to look like something because you want to have some sort of impact, it is doable, and they've just shown that. The leaders, you'll see it in a minute, but the leaders are Nicole Armstrong, where is she? Outside now setting the tables on sort of programmatic issues, and Greg Lechner, who has led the technology that allowed us to go around the world with the almost glitchless technology that we use to connect and communicate and collaborate. So one last round of applause for our staff, and roll the credits, Beth.